Hey folks, Dana Ammons here with the Brand Blueprint. And I want to start this week with a question that sounds simple at first, but if you really sit with it, it'll tell you almost everything about where your business actually is. What breaks first when you scale? Because something always breaks. And I think one of the biggest mistakes founders make is that they talk about growth like growth is automatically good news. Revenue is up, orders are up, traffic is up, people are finally paying attention. And retailers are responding. The founder feels like, okay, now we're moving. And that part is real. But what a lot of people don't understand until they're in it is that growth is just not expansion only. Growth is pressure on your systems, pressure on your margins, pressure on your operations, pressure on your fulfillment, pressure on your visibility into what's actually happening. And pressure has a way of exposing whatever the business was weak on before you got bigger. That's why I keep saying this. Growth doesn't just expand your business, it reveals it. Let me tell you where this is coming from. So I had a conversation recently with a founder who on paper looked like he was in a really strong place. Sales were growing. He had more interest than he had before. The business looked healthier from the outside than it had 6 months earlier. And yet, about 20 minutes into the conversation, he said something I think a lot of founders feel, but don't always know how to say. He said, Dana, we're growing, but I don't feel like the business is actually getting stronger. Now, that's a real founder statement. Because what he was describing wasn't a lack of demand, it was a lack of progress. And it was the fact that the business had reached the point where the things he could manually control at a smaller level were no longer holding the same way under more pressure. At lower volume, you can founder your way through a lot of things. You can answer every customer issue yourself. You can catch an inventory problem before it explodes, and you can stay up late and fix the mistake. You can patch a broken process with pure effort. You can carry weak systems on your back for a while. But once the business starts moving faster, the business begins asking you harder questions. Can your operations actually handle this? Can your numbers actually support this? Can your fulfillment process actually keep up with this? And can you still clearly see enough to make smart decisions as the moving parts multiply? That's when growth stops feeling like a trophy and starts feeling like real weight. And if you want my honest opinion, there are a few places that tend to break first. The first one is margin. They know the before version of their numbers. And what does that mean? Before returns, before shipping spikes, before promo pressure, before platform fees, before ad inefficiency, before operational waste, before founder labor that never gets counted. And man, it never gets counted. So the business can look like it's doing a lot more while it's actually keeping a lot less. And that's one of the most dangerous feelings in entrepreneurship when your volume goes up and your intuition says you should feel stronger, but your bank account, your cash flow, and your stress level are telling a different story. That's not always a revenue problem. Sometimes that is a margin truth that is finally showing up. Now, the second thing that tends to break is fulfillment. And I've seen this especially with physical product founders. At smaller scale, the process can feel fine enough. Orders come in, things go out. Maybe there's some chaos behind the curtain, but the customer still gets what they need and the founder feels like they're holding it together. Then volume increases. Now one missed order matters more. One packing issue matters more. One shipping delay affects more customers. One sloppy warehouse process multiplies into a bigger cost, and one bad assumption about your lead time can throw off your entire rhythm. At low scale, the problem is manageable. At higher scale, the same problem becomes operational drag. The third thing that breaks is visibility. And this one is sneaky because founders often don't feel it right away. At smaller levels, a lot of decision making is based on instinct and proximity. You know what customers are saying. You know what's moving. You know what feels strong. And you know what feels weak. But once the business starts to expand across more channels, more volume, more product movement, more complexity, intuition starts becoming less reliable until it's backed by actual visibility. Now the founder says things like, I knew we were growing, but I didn't realize the SKU was underperforming. I knew demand was up, but I didn't realize the promo was costing us more than it was helping. I knew we were getting traction, but I didn't know how much complexity we were adding. That's visibility breaking. The business is moving faster than the founder can clearly see what's happening. And once that happens, decisions get slower, sloppier, or more emotional. Then the fourth thing that breaks is the founder. Not necessarily emotionally first, operationally first. The founder becomes the bottleneck. Everything still runs through them, every exception, every vendor decision, every customer escalation, every approval, and also every surprise problem and every quick decision. At a lower scale, that can feel like hustle. At higher scale, that becomes a drag on the entire system. That's when the founder starts saying, I can't get ahead. I feel like I'm in everything. I thought growth would make this feel better. And what they're actually feeling is the consequence of scale landing on a system that was never redesigned for scale. That's why I think founders need to stop romanticizing growth and start interrogating it. You heard me right. Not fearing it, not avoiding it, not acting small, interrogating it. Which starts with asking better questions. What gets weaker as volume goes up? What gets harder to see? What gets more expensive than I expected? What depends too much on me? What looks like good enough now, but would clearly break under more pressure? Because if you ask those questions early, now growth becomes something you can prepare for instead of something you just react to. And that is where the stronger operators separate themselves. The hopeful founder says, we'll figure it out when we get there. The stronger founder says, let's identify the weak spot before it costs us. That's a different level of discipline. And that discipline is what keeps growth from becoming expensive chaos. So if your business is growing right now or you want it to grow, don't just ask, how do I get bigger? Ask, what breaks first when I do? Because that question will tell you a whole lot more about your future than your top line revenue ever will. If you want help pressure testing your business before scaling, or if the business is already growing and you can feel the pressure hitting parts of the operation you haven't fully diagnosed yet, that's the kind of work we do here at the Brand Blueprint. Reach me directly at dana@valuegrowthpartners.com. That's value without an E, or visit thebrandblueprint.biz to find out more information. Because the time to figure out what breaks first is before it breaks.